in which panelists express their views on problems related to dyslexia and the importance of awareness regarding the dyslexia. In next webinar, the area for improvement in dyslexic children were also identified and shared some online test tools, online tools for the dyslexic students. Last year also, AICT had conducted 5 webinars on inclusion of specific disability in universities and educational institutes. In today's session, there will be discussion about various disability as identified in the PWD Act 2016 and steps taken by the government for disabled students. Also, there will be a discussion about the AICT guidelines for disabled students in higher education. Hope you all will enjoy the session. Thanks a lot. Now you continue, please.
Thank you so much for the introduction, ma'am. So I'll be presenting from Changing Foundation side. At Changing, we build equitable ecosystems that accelerate mainstreaming inclusion of over 200 million Indians with learning disabilities from cradle to career, and to drive innovation, productivity, and growth for India to become a $10 trillion economy by 2035. Our co-founder, Nupur Jhunjhunwala, has been an advocate for inclusion and equity for the last 15 years, and the team is led by her. I will now begin. Uh, I request if all of you have any questions, you can put them on the chat. My colleagues will be taking a look and will be answering. So before we begin, I request all of you to scan this QR code to take a quick survey. And as soon as you're done, you can notify us in the chat or raise your hand. Okay. So I would now ask you all to identify from the picture that we're seeing on the screen, according to you, who has a specific learning disability amongst this group? You can unmute, you can let us know on chat.
Person one.
Anybody else? Okay, I see somebody says one on the chat. Okay, so the idea of this activity was to actually say that you can never identify a person with a specific learning disability by just looking at them because it's an invisible learning disability. And we'll further learn about how it manifests and what the characteristics are. But we must keep in mind that you cannot identify a person with a specific learning disability by just looking at them. Okay. So let's understand neurodiversity a bit better. Neurodiversity encompasses specific learning disabilities, which further include dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and dyspraxia. And neurodiversity additionally includes autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD. What is neurodiversity? It is differences in the way people's brains function, process, and learn information. Individuals who have specific learning disabilities have average or above average IQ. So when they are getting diagnosed, this is a criteria that has to be met. This is a lifelong condition that runs in families. Access to accommodations, assistive technologies help these individuals excel. It's an invisible learning disability, like we just learned. It is diagnosed through a very thorough psychometric testing. And these are individuals who often struggle with unemployment or underemployment. How specific learning disabilities manifest. This on the screen, as you can see, letters are mirroring, the words are moving. This is how dyslexia impacts language. This is how a dyslexic person's brain is likely to see a chunk of text. And dyslexia is the most common out of the specific learning disabilities that we discuss. It affects 80% of all. If a person has SLD, there's an 80% chance that it's dyslexia. Dyscalculia impacts math and numeric applications. It's present in about 5% of the population. So, as you can see, there's an issue with applying formulas, but there's also an issue with mirroring, and there's also an issue with the numeric quantification. Dysgraphia impacts writing. It affects a person's handwriting ability as well as their fine motor skills, which would be holding the pen or pencil correctly or tying shoelaces. And as you can see, the sentence that's written below would be written like that if a person has dysgraphia. We'll now watch a video to hear from a successful dyslexic person's lived experience.
The refrain was उसको आता सब कुछ है ये पता नहीं एग्जाम में क्या करता है because when it came to spelling my grammar was all over the place and for whatever reasons I'm not blaming the teachers. It maybe they themselves were clueless. The awareness about the dyslexia was not there and therefore when it came to the written exams I was very poor. I was very good at maths. My science was good, but if everything had to be judged by the written words, then that used to fail me. And for me, then I never looked, but I was very good at maths. I gave my JEE twice. I cleared both the times. I wanted to do physics. I came and did physics. And again, the thing is that JEE again is a paper which does not judge you on your on your written skill. It's basically your logic and the maths. So there I've excelled. I was lucky enough to work for InfoEdge Group, which was a startup. And these places, I mean, the thing is, if you're good, it's pure meritocracy. So if you're good, you keep getting the opportunities.
So, as we hear from Vivek's journey, what worked in his favor was that he was able to leverage his strengths, and the system worked in his favor, wherein he wasn't judged for his inability to write. He was judged more for his skills that helped him with entrepreneurship, and he's been an investor for leading startups like Zomato, Naukri, and he's worked with the InfoEdge group. Okay. Now we move on to another activity. Could anybody volunteer to read this text? And you have 60 seconds to read this text. So could we have a volunteer? You can unmute and begin. Okay. Professor AD Desai, I see you on the screen. Would you like to volunteer to read this? Okay, no problem. So the point of this activity would have been that you won't have been able to read this text in 60 seconds. And that's just to give you a sense of how a dyslexic person struggles to read and how you shouldn't be judged for your ability to um, process something when there's ways to find assistance. And this would have been a way to sort of understand how this is a paragraph which looks like that, and it encapsulates a dyslexic person's journey and way of thinking. Okay. So there's three aspects of dyslexic struggles. Dyslexia will always, SLDs will always impact academics, life skills, and one's emotional well-being. So when a person is struggling with all three of these spheres, then we think that they're at risk, and we suggest that they go for a screening or a detailed diagnosis. But these are the three key areas which interact, and these are the struggles that a person with SLDs face. Dyslexia, SLDs, they go beyond language processing. It's not just about struggles with how the brain processes something differently, it also impacts their executive functioning. So, a major struggle is a person's poor self esteem because they struggle with basic reading, basic math. A lot of people aren't aware. There aren't tools available to sort of assist these people to help them leverage their strengths. There's a lot of judgments about their IQ because we tend to look at reading and writing abilities as a litmus test to a person's intelligence. And this can often be very emotionally tumultuous. There's a lot of memory challenges. They can forget tasks, deadlines. It's difficult to keep up when there's multiple instructions to carry something out. They're very sensitive to overstimulation. They struggle with concentrating if there's movement, if there's sound, if there's light. There's a gap in the oral and written performance. So they could be very good at communicating verbally, but if you ask them to write the same thing down, there's going to be a gap in that. They take a little bit longer to process information, written information. They take a little bit longer to process a chunk of text if it's given to them. There's difficulties in planning. They often struggle with time management, and that in turn impacts their ability to plan tasks and to manage deadlines. Moving on to screening and identification. So, in India, as per the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, you can be diagnosed if only in or after third grade, or if a child is 8 years of age, whichever comes earlier. A screening um, can be done maybe slightly before the formal diagnosis can be done, and you can so early identification can help identify if a child is at risk of an SLD. um, so the process is very similar to taking a child to get their eyes tested if they have headaches or if they're struggling with vision. And as part of the screening process, not just the academic performance is assessed, but like we discussed, their impact on the daily life or one's emotional well being will also be looked at to determine whether they are at risk of an SLD. And one thing, the screening must be done in the primary language of the student, because there's often learning loss, or it's a first generation learner, it's a person who hasn't ever studied English, so there's reasons why their learning outcomes could be affected. So the screening must be done in the child's primary language. And one thing that we do sort of highlight is that it will manifest in all languages. An SLD cannot manifest in, say, Hindi but then not in English. They will struggle with linguistics overall. A diagnosis, on the other hand, requires a specialist. So it could be a pediatrician, it could be a psychiatrist, it could be a neurologist, it could be a clinical or rehabilitation psychologist. So the step one is assessing whether um, you want to eliminate something else that might be contributing to the struggles. So this could be visual or hearing impairments. Another thing that we do look at is the IQ. Like I mentioned, these are individuals who will always have average or above average IQ. And only then can we determine whether they have a specific learning disability or if there's something else that needs to be ruled out. The third step is the assessment itself, wherein we use psychometric tests to diagnose whether a person has an SLD, and then we determine how severe the specific learning disability is. So the benchmark currently is 40%. So if the diagnosis is confirmed for 40%, you can then get a disability certificate, UDID. And once you have this certificate or the UDID card, you can access facilities, benefits, concessions, reservations, etc., that are provided by the government. Right. So dyslexics, we've gone over the struggles, but these are individuals who are very resilient. And as we heard from Vivek's example, um, if you provide them with the right kind of support, they find ways to cope and succeed. Okay, we'll watch another video.
I was a cheater in class, and I'll tell you why. Because in math class, for example, the teacher would put up the sum on the table, and I would work it out in my head and have the answer ready with me. And when she would ask me, or he would ask me to show the working, I wouldn't have it, right? So they always assumed I copied it from my peer sitting next to me, and then the peer said, "No, I got the wrong answer." So this guy's figured it out in some way or form. So you went through that a few times because our brains just think differently, and we tend to understand what is being said before the other person is finished saying what they're saying. And that becomes very unnerving. I didn't know my ABCDs till the fifth grade, to be very honest. The only reason I could write my name was because there was another Kunal in my class. He wrote it, I memorized it, and I simply copied it. It was as simple as that. In the younger classes, I would sit at the back. So by the time the class finished reading the chapter twice, I had memorized it. So I would just pick up on where the person dropped off and recite from my memory. My sister started a computer class in the 8th grade and I was in the 5th, and I got intrigued by the fact that she was typing something on this electronic device and it was doing something magical on the screen, and I picked up on that and I started sort of spending my breaks in the computer lab bugging the teachers and the assistants to teach. Time I hit my 7th grade, I was actually doing 10th grade level programming and college school projects, and that's what became my go-to thing as an out for my lack of success in academia. And the school encouraged it, my friends encouraged it, and that's when I decided right on my 8th grade to get a full-time job.
So another thing that we uncover from Mr. Jhunjhunwala's example is that these are brains that are not defective; they are just different, and it's the system that often fails them in terms of how they are being assessed and how they are being helped to actualize their full potential. We saw that when he got support, he's now a founder of a leading fintech firm in India. Moving. So, um, we now realize that dyslexia actually powers our life. So, there were a lot of people who've contributed to groundbreaking inventions that have changed our life. And there is a dyslexic mind behind all of these. So, Albert Einstein was dyslexic, Edison was dyslexic, Alexander Graham Bell was dyslexic, Henry Ford was dyslexic, the inventors of the aeroplane Wright brothers were dyslexic, Steve Jobs had dyslexia, and Bill Hewitt as well. Dyslexia, when supported, can change our life. So we push for this narrative of inclusion for innovation. If you include these people, if you help them leverage their strengths, they will change your life because there is a certain phenomenon that we call um, the dyslexic edge. Um, I'm sorry for the glitch. Just give me a second. There's a phenomenon that we call the dyslexic edge, which we'll touch upon. But another noteworthy statistic is that 40% self made millionaires are dyslexic. So, all the icons that you see on the screen, the founders or the brains behind these companies, all had dyslexia. Dyslexic thinking is known to drive us all forward. Um, you all must be wondering that given all the struggles, given all the issues with executive functioning and planning, how can this mind make such an impact? Richard Branson, founder of the Virgin Group, actually kind of owes his success to dyslexia. As we can see, he says that I simply wouldn't be where I am today if I wasn't dyslexic. In the real world, dyslexia can be a huge advantage. Many people with dyslexia have great imaginations, creativity, and problem solving skills, which often contribute to their success. Moving on to the dyslexic edge, um, the brain that struggles with dyslexia has strengths like visualizing, innovative thinking, amazing communication skills, reasoning, connecting things that a typical mind might not see connections between, problem solving, and being able to see the bigger picture. So, global studies tell us that the percentage of students with dyslexia in fields such as engineering, arts, and entrepreneurship are over twice the percentage of individuals with dyslexia in the general population because of the dyslexic edge and the skills that sort of push them towards these fields of innovation, of leadership, and of arts. Top universities globally are known to attract students with specific learning disabilities because they are aware of the strengths it carries. They are aware of the fact that if these individuals are supported correctly, they have immense potential. In fact, MIT, um, dyslexia is so common that it's known as the MIT disease. Um, a lot of other globally leading universities like Yale, Brown, Stanford, um, they go and they accommodate struggles of a student with specific learning disabilities. Okay, so what is India doing to tap into the critical resource pool of dyslexic thinkers? We have the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. So, formally, dyslexia was recognized as a disability in India for the first time in 2016. It's defined as a heterogeneous group of conditions wherein there is a definite deficit in processing language, spoken or written, that manifests itself as a difficulty to comprehend, speak, read, write, and spell, or to do mathematical calculations. And it includes conditions as perceptual disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and developmental aphasia as well. RPWD Act mandates higher education institutions to reserve 5% seats in government and government aided institutions. The new education policy is also in sync. Um, it it mandates that children with disabilities, including those with SLDs, will be enabled to fully participate in the regular schooling process from the foundational stage to higher education, ensuring that they get equitable access to quality education. And universities and colleges will therefore be required to set up their systems in such a way that they are able to support these disadvantaged groups to transition to higher education. The new education policy gives directives to the government as well as to all higher education institutions. So you need to earmark suitable funds that will be required to support these disadvantaged groups. Clear targets have to be set for the enrollment rates. People need to, this group specifically, they need to be pushed to enter higher education institutions, and therefore higher targets of gross enrollment need to be set. They need to be provided with more financial assistance, so that could be scholarships, stipends, schemes, and they should be available in both public and private institutions. While these schemes could be available, we need to conduct outreach programs and sort of inform the cohorts of the opportunities that are available for them to enter these institutions. And we need to develop and support through technology tools for better participation, fair participation, and learning outcomes. What institutions can do, again, they can offer financial assistance, they can conduct outreach programs, they can spread awareness as to how available schemes are going to help these cohorts. They can make admission processes and curriculums inclusive. So it can go beyond just the usual written tests, or it can go beyond the traditional ways of assessing how much a person has learned. All infrastructure needs to be disable friendly. That there can be a development of bridge courses if a person is transitioning from higher education to from school education to higher education, wherein they're given that extra push to sort of adjust better. They can ensure that all stakeholders, faculty members, students, staff are sensitized so that they can accommodate the needs of these students. And they need to enforce that there's no discrimination and there are anti harassment rules that are set in place. So these are the steps that are provided by the National Education Policy. We now get into struggles that these students face when transitioning to higher education institutions. So the first thing is struggles with the on campus life. A student struggles to disclose that they have a disability because of the lack of awareness and because of the stigma attached to it. They struggle to self advocate, they will struggle to ask for their rights, for accommodations, because the system often isn't prepared. They will also struggle with bullying, rejection. They might isolate themselves. Um, as we know, they struggle with executive functioning, so managing daily tasks often becomes challenging because when you enter a higher education institution, there's a lot of um, independent living that you need to sort of be used to. And they often need support systems to help them with this. The second set of struggles are struggles with the academic life. So they might struggle with in classroom activities like reading, writing, note taking. This can be overwhelming. Um, they might struggle with academic planning in terms of deadlines, in terms of submitting tasks on time, in terms of exams. And they often struggle with balancing academic with additional sort of activities that a college brings. Emotionally, their self esteem is impacted. They struggle with well being. They are often overwhelmed with managing a new environment, managing various different tasks from social life to academic life to co curriculars. There's often a peer pressure, there's high levels of anxiety because of the adjustment, because of everything that they're learning to navigate, and there is often a risk of overstimulation. UGC has come up with very comprehensive guidelines for students with specific learning disabilities when it comes to transitioning to higher education institutions. Um, they advocate for transition support being available from school to college and from post graduation and from graduation to post graduation. um, they recommend that a need assessment board formally assesses um, what these students might need and that this is made available. Um, they also advocate for preparing these students for independent living and for social interaction. Additionally, they say that scholarships and schemes are provided so that the transition becomes easier. Additionally, they provide guidelines for student life on campus. Um, they recommend that the infrastructure is built accordingly, that there is universal accessibility guidelines that are followed. They also recommend that assignments are modified. So, as opposed to traditional exams and essays, there can be creative assignments that can be put in place, so you can discuss with a student without reducing the rigor of the academic assessment, how you can judge their learning. There can be accommodations present during exams from preferential seating so that they're not distracted and overstimulated to compensatory time. They can be provided with assistive technology along with training to use that technology to allow use of devices such as recorders and laptops in classrooms. And they should be given adequate placement and career advice to help with the transition from higher education to the job market or to vocation and internship. Another thing that is recommended is the implementation of all of this. So to implement it, um, capacity building and sensitization has to be in place. All stakeholders, faculty, administration, and students need to be sensitized towards the needs, struggles, and the steps each of those cohorts can take to help these students. Um, there needs to be a training in terms of how teaching and learning methods can be modified, how inclusive pedagogy can be put in place, how workload can be accommodated when it comes to deadlines or when it comes to assignments. And there needs to be awareness around success stories of these cohorts. And additionally, these students need to know who are potential employers and whether those employers have been sensitized towards their needs and their struggles as well as their strengths. Now, to monitor and to ensure that all of this is coordinated well and that it's in place, UGC recommends that administrative administrative frameworks need to undertake action to ensure that all of this is happening. They initiated a creation of an equal opportunity cell, which will be the coordinating body for these cohorts. To strengthen higher education institutions, UGC says that there needs to be full compliance with the units that are in place to coordinate. And they additionally recommend that a person with disability, somebody with a lived experience, heads or chairs these units to for us to ensure that whatever is being done is being seen from the correct lenses. AICT has also come up with very comprehensive guidelines for inclusive education. So again, transition to higher education institutions, we need to one promote admissions of students with specific learning disabilities under the disabled category. So they need to avail the reservation. They need to know of their rights. The admission processes need to be streamlined. There needs to be accommodation provided for the admission processes for students with specific learning disabilities, and scholarships and sponsorships um, need to be provided. And AICT recommends setting up a disability support unit that can be the coordinating body for this specific task. Moving on to student life on campus, AICT recommends that there be accessible infrastructure that's put in place uh, with regards to assistive technology, hardware, software as well, and providing training to all stakeholders. Um, then promoting in-class use of this technology as well as providing accessible course material. So if there's a book that a student has to read, um, the faculty needs to ensure that an accessible format of that book is made available for the student. Providing exam support, so scribes need to be available. AICT also recommends that 20 more minutes per hour of examination needs to be given. Objective type questions need to be given so that you're not assessing in the traditional handwritten examination kind of way, allowing computers, as well as separating these students' mark sheets so that they are graded accordingly, so that there is sensitization when it comes to marking these answer scripts. And again, career and employer sensitization needs to be put in place. The companies coming to recruit need to know of these cohorts, again, strengths and struggles, as well as the students need to be handheld through the process of placements. Implementation. Um, what AICT recommends here is that SWAYAM courses can be put in place to train faculty on accommodation solutions. There can be a person with disability database management system, which also further helps with monitoring standards of accessibility, what's in place, what provisions are there, who is availing these provisions. They also advocate for inclusive pedagogy. So you train your faculty members in universal designs of teaching, wherein they're not just catering to one set of students, but they're catering to UDL would help teach every student better. Then awareness and advocacy needs to be in place. Um, these students, their rights, community outreach, ensuring that students who are in high school, they are prepared. So college readiness programs are put in place so that there are students who are aware of their rights and they are applying to colleges, um, being aware of their rights. And for governance, AICT actually mandates a Center for Learning Diversity for students with specific learning disabilities, as well as equal opportunity facilitation cells to be the coordinating bodies for these cohorts. They also recommend that research and development is encouraged. So, investing in research, providing research grants, and pushing for, again, development of solutions for these cohorts. They also recommend that appropriate budget is allocated for promoting activities for inclusion. So they could be events, they could be hackathons. This is something that AICT recommends, and they recommend that these coordinating bodies and units need to be adequately funded. They need to be provided with the resources to carry out these tasks efficiently. Additionally, the National Institute Ranking Framework, the NIRF ranking, they allocate points to the parameter of outreach and inclusivity, which is something that ensures that the category of people with disabilities is there's an incentive for institutions to provide for this cohort. Okay, we'll now watch a video from the founder of Maharashtra Dyslexia Center.
Rohit was one of our early entrants into higher education. He has significant difficulties with reading and writing. The admissions committee at the college was worried whether he would be able to manage the multiple flight of stairs to his classroom. But in reality, he actually found it difficult to navigate new schedules, new systems, keeping up with his lectures, getting to his classroom on time, finding his classroom, making new friends. The list was endless. The first day he went to college, he went to the library to get his library cards, and he was pulled up for his illegible handwriting with the comment, "This is what happens when we have to fulfill quotas in admission." Not surprisingly, Rohit struggled through the first term. He was quite miserable. He spent as little time as possible at college. And it was only regular, intensive counseling that kept him on track. His exams came along, the first term exams, and he had discovered that he'd been given extra time to finish his papers, but the seat in the hall had to be vacated because the next exam was scheduled immediately after. And he was describing this to his counselor. He says, I felt like a worm. Everybody was standing in the corridor and discussing what to do with me. The principal came along and asked what was going on. And he took a different view. He pulled up the staff for not having made adequate arrangements. And he took Rohit with him. I'm going to describe this in his own words, which he told us about later. He said, "Ma'am, he took me to his own office. He sat me down at his desk. He made space there for me. And he told me to finish my paper, take as long as I wanted. And he said, I'm sitting outside making phone calls. Don't worry, nobody's going to disturb you here." What a validation. This validation really changed his life at college. Suddenly, he was able to advocate for himself. He dived into campus activities, took part, joined some clubs. Ironically, in his last year at college, he took over a student newsletter as editor, and he made so many changes and made it so innovative that it won several awards.
Yeah. So what we learned from Rohit's example is one, the mindset shift that you can look at a student from that singular story that, oh, this is a person with a disability, and so let me treat them a certain way, create the cycle that, okay, I expect them to perform a certain way, or you can help them leverage their strengths. How validation or support from a single person, you saw the change it kind of brought about in Rohit. And what we can learn from it is that whatever role in whatever capacities we can play to enable these students, we should really try and look into that. Moving on to what we can learn from global leaders. Okay, so right, so leading institutions across the world, all of them cater to specific learning disabilities, and they have systems in place to support specific learning disabilities. So, MIT has a Disability and Access Services Office, DAS. This not only caters to students, but it also caters to faculty and visitors with disabilities. Yale has the Center for Dyslexia and Creativity. University of California, Berkeley has the Office of Disability Compliance. Stanford University has Office of Accessible Education and Schwab Learning Center. Ashoka University has Office of Learning Support, and IIM Bangalore has Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Center for Teaching and Learning. We'll hear from an expert on global best practices.
think what I try to do is inform the faculty of what dyslexia is. No matter how bright or accomplished or educated people have outmoded views of dyslexia. So to work with the faculty at conferences individually. And that's when you find out a number of the faculty are dyslexic. And I think we are very, very fortunate that at Yale, that people who are in administration have been very, very supportive. For example, at our Yale Center, we, anybody that thinks they might have trouble learning or have dyslexia are referred. It's amazing what different stories they have and what different beliefs there are about dyslexia. So we try to speak with the faculty, have them understand, and what people were just saying. I mean, one of the things, for example, is learning a foreign language. We were seeing so many students that were working so hard, students who were dyslexic, on their foreign language requirement, and they weren't succeeding, and it was taking their time from courses they could succeed in. So very fortunately at Yale, I was able to work with people at the highest levels and suggest that maybe we can have a partial waiver of the foreign language requirement so that people could take a course in English, but based on helping you to understand the country, the culture.
So, from Sally, we hear about how Yale has worked towards inclusion. And one thing, again, what we'd like to emphasize is that you don't have to lower the rigor of any academic program. All you need to do is ensure that these are students who are getting the accommodations and the help they need to be able to keep up with that rigor. Right. So, what all of you as heads of institutions and practitioners can do to enable transition to higher education institutions. We look at it in terms of four pillars, which is coordination, on campus support, um, technological support, and research. So, in terms of coordination, uh, we streamline accommodations for SLDs across the university. We facilitate individualized accommodations. We understand what a student needs case by case. We don't um, provide blanket accommodations for everyone. We try to understand who's struggling with what and then communicate with the faculty accordingly. We work towards awareness and advocacy and learning diversity. Um, there should be provisions for tutoring and supplementing academic support, and there should be career and placement related support. In terms of on campus support, um, there should be inclusion in terms of these students managing independent living. There should be adequate provisions in terms of having residential assistants or peer networks. There should be awareness and inclusion in terms of the extracurricular activities on campus, from clubs and societies to um, various administrative POCs that are running these clubs. Um, there should be campus handbooks that are and resources that are available and accessible for maths. So if there's a brochure that's available, a detailed brochure or a handbook, that should also be available in in a PDF that is accessible for these students to use it through their immersive readers or through OCR scanners. And there should be access to support systems for mental well-being. In terms of technological support, there should be adequate access and provision of assistive technologies. Then there should also be provision for mainstreaming usage of these in the curriculum that is being followed. There should be workshops with the faculty members on assistive technologies to one, train them and for them to enable students with disabilities to use them. There should be technological assistance in terms of time management, schedule management, and in terms of research, there should be centers of neurodiversity, and neurodiverse scholars should be provided with research grants to further research and development. And there should be adequate lobbying with organizations and partnerships that are keen to further research in the area of neurodiversity and SLDs. I'm sorry, I think there's a glitch on my end. Just give me a second. Yeah, apologies for the break. So aligned with pillars of global best practices, um, are the pillars of enabling inclusion. So, what we just covered, the global best practices also recommend providing counseling support, academic support, assistive technologies, and research. Counseling support would cover consultations, personal learning, ensuring that there's adequate coordination amongst all stakeholders and that the community is prepared to support students with disabilities and SLDs. Academic support, as we've covered, there should be adequate adjustments to the curriculum, to the pedagogy, and modified learning environments should be available. In terms of assistive technologies, there should be consultations available for students and faculty members. So, for instance, Stanford has an assignment calculator which helps the student manage their workload better. For Yale, there is Shavit's Dyslexia Screener, which is provided for students who would like to be, who might be at risk and who would like to be screened for specific learning disabilities. And in terms of research, again, Yale is doing some phenomenal work in terms of establishing dyslexia interventions, and they have ongoing longitudinal studies. Um, for MIT, there's the McGovern Institute for Brain Research. They look at brain imaging, they look at cognitive neuroscience. From University of California, Berkeley, they've invested $20 million to advance research in neuroscience and cognition to support dyslexia. Moving on to how you can support students transition better to higher education institutions, um, providing adequate academic support. So, course material should be accessible. Swayam courses, for instance, should be made accessible. There should be enough instructional aids and services like note takers, scribes, devices should be allowed in classrooms. There should be a provision of alternative assignment deadlines. There should be adequate accommodations in terms of exams with compensatory time, providing readers if the question papers are too wordy and lengthy, ensuring that these students have access to distraction-free zones, and offering tutoring and counseling services for academic support. In terms of student life, there should be um, support available in terms of navigating university life as a whole. There should be accommodations in terms of, again, need assessment at the time of admissions. There should be an availability of advocates on campus who are driving the inclusion agenda forward for this cohort on campus. And there should be a facility available for mental health support, access to resources, so they should know about all the schemes and scholarships that are there, and there should be more of these schemes and scholarships to be um, provided to these students. There should be assistive technology available, along with the demonstration of the right kind of usage. uh, there should be assistance in making academic course material accessible, and lastly, employment opportunities should be taken care of. There should be information in terms of placements, in terms of internships, in terms of employers who are interested in hiring from an inclusive perspective, ensuring that employers are sensitized towards the strengths of these students with specific learning disabilities, and again, relaying information to students in terms of inclusive employers. We want to leave you with a thought that when inclusive classrooms are designed well, they don't just cater to students with specific learning disabilities. Similar to universal design of learning, they help all students learn better. So when you're raising the standards, you're actually improving the quality and the experiences for all students. We'll hear from another expert.
The whole idea behind universal design is that it's important for every student. And here in the Academic Center for Excellence at Bryant, we also have our support services for our international students and English as a second language students. And as we discuss universal design with our faculty, we are finding that If we focus on just disability, it's harder for them because they see that as a small segment of the population. But if we focus on all students, and we also talk about our English as a second language students, that we can really show that universal design concepts can apply for them and can help them to learn more effectively in the classroom. So for example, even doing something like adding captions to your videos can help English, students who are studying the English language to know exactly what's happening in the classroom and to better access the material. Also, if we provide note-taking technology that students who may not be able to write quickly, whether they have learning disabilities or they aren't able to fluently write in English, are able to succeed. So it's really a matter of taking those universal design concepts and helping the faculty to know that it's not just students with disabilities. And university-wide, if we talk about this, it's much better than if it comes just out of my area, because they don't necessarily see that then as applying to the whole population.
So reiterating what she said, that universal design of learning or inclusive concepts, again, not just cater to one community, but they cater to towards making your entire community more inclusive. So before we wrap up, as just a summary or just as a starting point for all of you, we'd like to leave you with 5 starting points. One, um, start at the beginning, start with inclusive admissions, try and focus on increasing the enrollment of students into the PWD category and start tracking success stories. Let people know about how support enables a person actualize their potential. Encourage admissions. Second, focus on sensitization and awareness. Um, all stakeholders need to know about the rights, needs, struggles of these cohorts. Accommodations, third, under the 2 Cs. So focus on classroom accommodation and curricular accommodation. Um, Fourth, focus on centers of support. So as we've seen, various units have been enabled by our regulators, creating a disability support unit, an equal opportunity cell, or a center for learning diversity. Try setting up a coordination body in place that helps these processes sort of be put in place seamlessly. And lastly, try to consciously build and foster a culture of inclusion in your respective institutions. Um, like we have been pointing out, you do not want to be missing out on the genius of the next Einstein, of the next Steve Jobs or Walt Disney, just because they weren't provided with adequate support. So, with that, we'd like to end. So, just as a post session feedback, I would like all of you to scan this QR and help us assess how the presentation has gone.
Thank you, Bhavya, for such interesting and informative presentation regarding the PWD students, and in which you have taken the various examples on the dyslexic persons, and you have told that dyslexic person has very good communication power, and they are very good in reasoning and problem solving also. You have told about the PWD Act discussion. There was very informative discussion about the PWD Act, and you have told about the steps taken by the government and also the steps taken by AICT in regard of PWD students. That was really such a informative session. Thank you, Bhavya.
Thank you so much. And we would like to thank AICT for enabling and for providing us the support to conduct these webinars effectively and just very smoothly. So thank you so much for all the support.
Thank you. If somebody has some query, then you can ask.
All right. Thank you so much for connecting, everyone. We can wrap up with this, and we hope we've left you with enough food for thought and for action.